think, Marge. All I need is a title.
On June 5th and again on June 26th, we had a total of 11 states holding primaries. As of today, more than half of the states in the United States have held their primary elections. The results of this group of elections hold some interesting results and set up some notable showdowns for the midterm general election in November. In California, we have the weird case of the gubernatorial election where the top two vote getters advance to the general elections regardless of what parties they are in. In this case, the current Lieutenant Governor, Gavin Newsom, will face off against Republican John Cox. This is a bit of a surprise result because it had been thought that the Democratic mayor of Los Angeles, Antonio Villaraigosa, might have a better chance to get into the runoff. As it is, the primary sets up a confrontation between the establishment that is responsible for California's situation, for better or worse, and a conservative GOP candidate who might start the effort to bring the state back from the brink. The current polls show Newsom up by 17 points, but Cox may be underpolling. Because of this, Politics City will not make a prediction just yet. In the U.S. Senate races, we have Senior Senator Dianne Feinstein, who at 84 is the oldest member of the U.S. Senate. Feinstein will advance to the general election after receiving 44% of the vote. The runner-up at 11% was fellow Democrat Kevin De Leon, who will most probably fail to unseat the incumbent. Other winners in the California primaries are Tom McClintock, who was targeted by the Dems, Devin Nunes, who is at the center of the U.S. House oversight of the FBI and Justice Department's probe into Russian collusion and interference in the 2016 elections, Dana Rohrabacher, and Duncan Hunter. In case you are wondering, in California's 43rd House District, Maxine Waters will face Republican Omar Navarro in the general election. At the moment, it does not look as though Navarro will be able to prevail against low-IQ Maxine. In a referendum over Medicaid privatization, Iowa's Republican Governor Kim Reynolds will face off against Democrat business owner Fred Hubbell, who favors a single-party option. Politics City predicts that Reynolds will hold on to her position. In Montana, State Auditor Matt Rosendale will advance to take on Democrat incumbent John Tester. Rosendale might be able to point to his responsibilities as the state auditor, but outside groups have spent quite a bit on this race, seeing a possible pickup here. The problem is, John Tester has significant name recognition and seniority in the U.S. Senate, while Rosendale's support from outside groups might alienate him amongst Montana voters. Politics City still believes that John Tester will retain his seat. In New Jersey, the question is, will Bob Menendez get a third term in the U.S. Senate? He will face GOP businessman Bob Hugin, who financed his own primary campaign. Normally, in such a blue state, there might not be much hope for the GOP to pick up a seat. However, the optics of Menendez being on trial for corruption certainly do not look good, and Hugin is certain to highlight that in campaign ads in the state. It will be enough for Politics City to move this race from Menendez to a toss-up. In New Mexico, the Democrats are likely to pick up a governorship, as Susana Martinez is term limited out of office. Democrat Michelle Grisham has a 13-point lead over Republican Steve Pierce. While races tend to tighten up as we get closer to the general election, New Mexico has become the blue enclave inside of the mostly red West. With this in mind, Grisham's prospects look pretty good at this point. Meanwhile, after a hotly contested primary, Republican Kristi Noem will advance to the general election in South Dakota and will probably win the governor's house. In the second round of primaries in June, the big story was the upset of Democrat House Leader Joe Crowley, who would be the fourth in line after Nancy Pelosi if the Democrats were able to retake control of the chamber. It's not only that Crowley was defeated, as this is an example of the Democrats being taken even further to the left, with more moderate, more established Dems being forced out. The heart of this story is that the winner was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a 28-year-old Hispanic woman who was born in Puerto Rico and was living in the Bronx. Looking at Crowley, this was a case of a challenger picking off low-hanging fruit. Crowley was basically handed his position, as in 1998 he ran for the seat, but the incumbent retired after the primary date, so Crowley was able to coast into office uncontested. Since that time, the seat had been considered very safe, to the point that Crowley skipped out of 2 of the debates scheduled against Ocasio-Cortez, and the New York Times had only 1 story featuring her candidacy. She was ignored until she won. However, now, Ocasio-Cortez is a socialist who advocates for the abolishment of ICE, amongst other things. Most mainstream Dems wouldn't go this far, and this is an example of the left dragging the rest of the party with it. Ocasio-Cortez will probably sit at the back of the U.S. House and get nothing done. Henry McMaster won the governor's seat in South Carolina, winning an election for the position that he has held since former Governor Nikki Haley became the U.S. ambassador to the UN. McMaster's win solidifies Trump's support in the Deep South. McMaster made his support of the president known even before his nomination to the primary, and this might send some signals as to what we might expect in 2020. In Maryland, former NAACP President Ben Jealous will go up against GOP incumbent Larry Hogan for governor. This is one position in the blue region of the country held by the GOP that will most probably remain so, as Hogan is quite popular in that state. The situation is quite different in Oklahoma, where Governor Mary Fallin is being term limited out of office. 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat will advance to the general election. Given that the state is comfortably red, the real action is on the GOP side of things, with former Oklahoma City Mayor Mick Cornett competing against Tulsa businessman Kevin Stitt. In Colorado, the governor has been term limited out of office, leading to this month's primary, where Democrat Jared Polis and Republican Walker Stapleton will advance to the November election. Polis has made the news recently for being the first openly gay candidate for governor, and he might win, as Colorado tends to elect Democrats for governor. This election, however, might be a bit different, as Stapleton is running on lower taxes and preventing the inaction of a single-payer option in the state. Finally, in a race where the results are almost a foregone conclusion, Mitt Romney has won the GOP primary for the U.S. Senate seat in Utah and will probably win the seat that is being vacated by GOP veteran Orrin Hatch. With a couple of exceptions, the current status quo seems to be holding. This means that the Democrats' expected blue wave is actually disappearing, and fast. However, the reverse, a red wave that was recently predicted by President Donald Trump, remains, for the moment, a bit premature. While the GOP might pick up a couple more Senate seats because of these results, the other results are a retrenching on both sides, with both parties picking up seats where they would be expected to pick them up.